Everyone likes to gain some new information. Well, Michelle Paver certainly gave us that. Look out for the section on the brains.
Some of you would have probably read Chronicles of Ancient Darkness, Wolf Brother, or some of the other books. Those were set 6,000 years ago in the Stone Age. A boy, a wolf, in the Stone Age. Gods and Warriors is still in prehistory, but it's a little bit later. It's 3,500 years ago in the Bronze Age. And we moved south to the Mediterranean, what today we call ancient Greece. But this is actually before the sort of ancient Greece with beautiful marble temples and a nice tidy range of gods like Zeus and Poseidon. Ancient Greece, in the time of gods and warriors, was a wild world. Mountains, forests full of bears and wolves and maybe lions too. Say a bit more about lions later on. The sea was never very far away. It was full of sharks and monsters. People lived, some of them lived like Torak did in the Stone Age, like by hunting and gathering. Those are the poor ones, and my hero Hylas is one of those. Or they were warriors or slaves or priestesses or chieftains. But whoever you were, life was uncertain. You never knew when a storm was going to sink your ship or an earthquake was going to flatten your hut. And so you were always on the lookout for omens, for signs from the gods and the spirits. Is that bird circling above you? Is it just a bird, or is it a message from the ancestors, your dead ancestors? Was the stranger you met on the hillside, was he just a traveller, or was he a god in disguise? So it was a very uncertain world. So that's the world of gods and warriors, the Bronze Age. What about the story? Well, as I said, my hero, Hylas, is he's at the bottom of the pile. He's the lowest of the low. He's 12 years old. He's growing up in the mountains of southern Greece. He's a goat herder. He's looking after someone else's goats, which he's not allowed to eat them, so he has to live like Torak a little bit, hunting and gathering his food. All he knows about his world is his dog and his little sister and his goats. And then something happens which is going to change his life forever. His camp is attacked by warriors in black rawhide armour. It's quite a nice look actually, with black rawhide armour, sort of leather armour. His camp is attacked, his dog is killed, his goats are scattered, his sister goes missing. He's on the run. He doesn't know why the black warriors are after him, but they are. But when he's on the run, he makes friends with two creatures. One creature is a girl called Pyrrha. She's 12, and she's from the upper levels of society. She is the daughter of the high priestess on Crete. I call it Kefti in the books because priest is a modern name. And Pyrrha is unimaginably rich, but she spent her whole life cooped up in the house of the goddess. Think of it like a sort of palace. And so she's run away. She's desperate to be free. And Hylas also makes friends with a dolphin called Spirit. And just as in Wolf Brother, part of the story is told from the dolphin's point of view. And I'll be telling you a bit about how I got to meet some dolphins later on. And there'll be 5 books in the series, and Spirit, the dolphin, is the first of 3 animals who are going to form friendships with Hylas and Pyrrha, and are going to weave in and out of the stories. And they're good friends to have for Hylas and Pyrrha. There's a dolphin, a falcon, and a lion. And when you think about it, if you're having adventures and you're being chased by a warrior clan in the Bronze Age, a dolphin is probably the cleverest creature in your world. A falcon is definitely the fastest, and a lion is one of the strongest. So those are quite good allies to have on your side. Of course, the Black Warriors are still out there, so somehow Hylas has to find a way of defeating them and finding out why they're after him. And all of the 5 books are, each one is a separate adventure, but that overarching quest of Hylas carries right the way through. Now, some of you have read the Torak books, and you'll know that what I'm trying to do when I write is to try to make the story real. I want each of you to feel that you're actually having the adventure with Torak and Ren and Wolf, or Hylas and Pyrrha and the dolphin. And so what I try to do when I'm writing is I try to experience as much as I can of what the characters are going to do. So for Hylas, I went to Greece and I climbed the mountains of Sparta, and it struck me that he is really living like a hunter-gatherer. So everything he needs for survival, he he has to find and make from what's around him in the forest. Food, clothes, weapons, shelter, all of that from just what's around him. So if he needs to make a snare, for example, to kill an animal, to trap animals, he'll need string. This is, as I said, it's from just what's around him in the forest. It's from trees, animals, plants, rocks. Can anyone guess what this is made of? It's string. What's it? Grasses. That's quite close. It's definitely made of plants. You could probably. Nettle string. How did you know? Yes, this is actually made of nettle stems. You could do the same thing with brambles, or quite a few other things. Even sort of the smaller roots of trees you could twist into string. So Hylas knows, just like Torak did, Hylas can use this to make a snare. If you want to make, I don't know, fish hooks, you might find a bit of antler. Now, you wouldn't find a bit of reindeer antler, which is what this is, but that's what Torak would find in the Stone Age. But still, in the Bronze Age, you're still finding bits of antler maybe, or wood, and he can make fish hooks out of it. Of course, he's not going to get very far without a knife and an axe, particularly because he's got to cut down trees and branches to build shelters. Hylas, as I said, is poor, so he's never even seen bronze. He's never seen metal because he's too poor. But so he'll use flint, just as in the Stone Age Torak would do. And this actually is very old. This is a Stone Age axe head, but it's the sort of thing that Hylas would also make in the Bronze Age. So this is the real thing. This is, maybe you can see at the back, but when I'm signing, I'll have all these things on my table so you can have a look at them and pick them up and things. It's made of flint. Hylas knows how to cut it. I don't, because it takes quite a long time to learn. And it wouldn't take him very long to produce one of these, and he would mount it on a stick to turn it into an axe. And actually, the thing about this, which I really like, which shows how clever they were, is that you want the right size axe for the person. So if you're a small person, you don't want a really huge axe because you're not going to be able to handle it. And the rule of thumb, when you test how big you measure your axe head, is the head of the axe, this, should go from that, the bottom of my hand, to the top of my middle finger. So if you can see, this axe head is not, it's a little bit small for me. I'd need a slightly bigger one. But maybe it fits some of you. So maybe when, if you're signing, if I'm signing your book, you can measure your hand and see if this would be the right axe for you. So anyway, that's Hylas. In terms of weapons, but of course when he kills an animal, just as Torak did in the Stone Age, when Hylas kills an animal, it's quite a big deal, because he didn't regard animals as sort of separate and think he could just do what he liked with them. So I think the Bronze Age people would feel that they had to make sure that they were not displeasing the animal spirit, because they wanted to kill more animals in the future so they wouldn't starve. So when Hylas kills an animal, he thanks its spirit for giving its body to him. And then he makes sure that he doesn't waste any bit. And this is something that I've found again and again when I've talked to Inuit, or people in Japan, or Africa, or Aborigines in Australia. When they kill an animal, traditionally they feel they should use all the bits of the animal. So you may have been wondering why this unfortunate rabbit is sitting here. Pretend this is a hare, because there weren't any rabbits in ancient Greece. And if you imagine, Hylas has just throttled this using one of his nettle stem snares. He's going to use all the bits of the animal. So can someone suggest a body part, and I'll tell you what he would use it for. The liver, nice one, but you need the liver because it's full of minerals and iron. You might well eat it raw because it's quite easy to eat raw, and it's better for you when it's eaten raw. I've eaten raw seal liver, and that tastes quite nice actually. It looks disgusting because it's all sort of steamy and bloody, but it actually tastes quite sweet and delicious. Right at the back, you'll have to shout. The heart, the fur. Ah yes, now he would skin the animal. That's the first thing he'd do, is skin the animal and scrape the inside surface, the non-furry surface, so that it's not all bloody and fatty. And then he'd rub the non-furry side. This is a reindeer's skin, and so he'd rub rub the non-furry side with the mashed brains, and that turns it into leather. So just think about that, mashed brains. It's a bit like yogurt in consistency, it's very fatty, very good for turning hide into leather. There's a lovely old American Indian saying that every animal, including every one of you, has just enough brain in its skull to turn its own hide into leather. That's nice, isn't it? Yes, I'm sure you really are better for knowing that. There we are. The eyes, sorry, that was yes, it makes a funny noise, I don't know why. The eyes, you might well eat them because eyes are quite watery, and so if he was very thirsty, he would definitely eat them. So if he was adrift on the sea, he would eat them. Otherwise, you can boil them down and get a sort of glue out of them. But I was told by an Inuit, actually, up in Greenland, that they're a treat for the grandmothers, seals' eyes, that is, because if older people tend to, because their teeth have fallen out, and so they can't chew tough meat, so they tend to squidge up the eyes. The lungs, now those are quite sort of stretchy and porous, and they wouldn't taste great, so unless you were starving, you probably wouldn't eat them, and you'd feed your dog with them. So all the sort of rotty bits you'd give to your dog. The back leg bones, well, those are nice long bones, aren't they? And what you do is you split them, and you eat the marrow. Anyone here eat the marrow? It's the nice sort of jellyish. Ah, interesting. Well, I have. It's really nice. It's sort of jellyish and fatty, and that's very, very good for you. You'd eat that. And then the long bone themselves you'd split, and you'd probably turn some of them into needles, and then you'd use the thread, that's the sinew which holds the joints together, so the animal really makes its own sewing kit, so you can then sew its hide together, but you might also use the bones for toggles and things like that. Also jewellery, I always forget, this is actually a bear's tooth and claws with little bits of bone here. This was made by an American Indian up in Arctic Canada. You use all the bits of the animal, but have one or two, yes. You could definitely use the bone for arrowheads, absolutely right. They use all sorts of things for arrowheads. They sometimes use the beaks of birds for arrowheads. Good point, thank you. Yes? The tail, well that's not much actually. They probably either feed that to the dog, or maybe as a sort of decoration on clothing and that sort of thing. Yes, one more behind, yes. Ears, again, same sort of thing. There's not a great deal you can do with those. But there's plenty, I'm sure you've all got body part questions, so when we come to the question time of this, please feel free to ask a body part question. But the basic idea is that when Hylas, or indeed Torak, kills an animal, they really like to use every bit of it. And it's not just about, liking to use every bit and needing that, it's a spiritual thing. They feel that if they don't do that, then maybe the gods, in Hylas's case, or the spirits, are going to be angered and not send more animals to be killed. So it's, again, it's an uncertain world that Hylas lives in. Now Pyrrha, of course, is, as I said, unimaginably rich, so she's the other end of the scale, and she lives, if anyone's keen on archaeology, Pyrrha comes from the Minoan civilization on Crete, so incredible clothes, wonderful jewellery. When I was doing the research, I looked into Pyrrha's clothes, and they had these wonderful colours made of vegetable dye. But the most expensive dye of all was this wonderful purple colour, and that came from sea snails, mashed sea snails. You can imagine it smelt appalling making this stuff. And they worked out that to dye just the hem of a tunic would take 12,000 snails. So this was more expensive than gold, this purple. So in the book, when I have Pyrrha wearing a beautiful tunic, which is entirely purple, you get the idea that she's quite rich. But again, even for Pyrrha, she lives in a beautiful stone sort of temple, almost palace, life is uncertain. Because we know that an earthquake flattened the great temple complex of Knossos. So even for her, her mother's the priestess, they spend a lot of their time sacrificing to the gods and pouring out blood and wine and oil in beautiful sacrificial vessels, trying to stave off disaster.